In this video today, the Redcat Ascent 18 is going to get a brand new chassis from Injora, full carbon fiber chassis kit. We're going to be comparing before and after. Difference does this kit make? Does we see a weight difference? Overall, is it worth it to put this on, and how to put it on? That's what we're doing here today. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is Roadside RC. You'll tend to find me bashing or crawling or drifting or racing, plus doing product review videos and how-tos. Let's get into it by seeing what's in these bags of parts. And the bag is full of bags. We just have lots of little parts. Little different trays, looks like chunks of frame rails, some double-sided tape, and what looks to be some rubber O-rings, which is interesting. Standoffs, a whole bunch of different screws, some more what looks like chassis parts, and thankfully, some level of instruction to tell us where the heck all this stuff is going to go. This secondary bag just has sliders, angled side guides, angled side sliders, along with some more screws to go along with it. Before we get started with the install, I do want to take a couple measurements, and of course one of them has to be the stock weight, or the pre-weight. Now this truck is not stock, it does have some modifications done to it. Before we get started here, we're talking about 612 total grams. Now we're going to be looking to see if we can make that any lighter, and we're going to be hoping that this 63-37 split, we're going to hope that some of that ends up more on the front. So we have 384 on the front, 228 on the rear. I want some more of that to come up here, and I want that total number to come down. To see how we change the chassis, height potentially to the top of the rear bumper is about 62 millimeters, and the top of the front bumper actually pretty dang close, 62, 63, somewhere in that range. Then if we measure the flex of the truck, there it sets right there to the bottom of the tire, right at 60 millimeters. Over here on the front to the bottom of the tire, about 45 millimeters. This swap is actually a fairly straightforward one. The only things I needed was a little wrench or a pair of pliers in order to hold some of the nuts still. You need a handy dandy electric screwdriver, 1.5 millimeter speed tip, and some double-sided tape to remount the ESC down. Now the instruction manual that comes with this is not much more than just an exploded diagram. I am hoping that what I can do is follow this to assemble the chassis, and then just bolt everything over from the old one to the new one. Fingers crossed that's how it works. Using the instructions, chassis bolts together pretty smoothly. It's a little bit hard to see in the instructions, this kind of Z shape that they want for this part. And it's going to end up bolting on right here, but I think we want to swap some components over, like the center skid and everything, before we bolt this down. So we're going to leave them separate from now. But I believe it's about time to go ahead and set this aside and start taking this bad boy apart and getting all the parts swapped over onto that chassis. In order to try to make this as straightforward as possible, what we're going to do is unplug the components from the ESC. I'm going to take the side skids off, the shock mounts, and then try to get straight to that center skid. And so what that's going to end up doing then is getting me the whole drive line, maybe as one chunk, that can be swapped over here to the new vehicle. Well, there we go. One chassis. We're still going to have to get the bumpers off of it. Don't know if we're going to need this front support up here anymore. We will see. Don't know. It looks like it would transfer over if we needed it, so we could potentially use it. But old chassis is off. Now it's going to be time to try to lace the new chassis back in there. I'm looking at this new versus old. So these are the original Redcat ones. These are the ones that Injora provides. And the Injora ones are noticeably bigger. Noticeably bigger. And I'm usually a fan of smaller. The other thing is Redcat did a really good job of designing these smooth here along the side, whereas Injoras are very bumpy here because they have the screw holes in it. It's more of a one-part design versus the two-part here from Redcat. So I'm pretty sure that what I'm going to do is still reuse the original ones. Looks like, of course, the mounting holes are going to be the same because they're mounting into the skid plate and the links, and so they're the same. I'm going to go with the small one. Well, I didn't actually expect that. So if you look at the factory chassis, it's actually not straight. It actually has a curve to it, and their skids have an angle there to match that, which means if you try to use it on the new one, there is a very noticeable gap. So I think I'm going to just take it over to the grinder and just smooth these angles out and let that come back in flash. Alright, center skid is bolted in, and that bolts in quite nicely actually. So now we are onto the shock mounting, and of course now, compared to the factory chassis, we have dramatically more locations where we could actually choose to mount the shocks. I am going to go, with the lack of any other better knowledge, I'm going to go with the kind of utmost front, highest and most forward position in the rear, and basically the same thing in the front. Obviously this is a tuning thing. We will need to continue to change it depending on how we're using the vehicle, what we're using the vehicle, exact setup of the vehicle, how you want it to drive. I'll have to continue to change where those are mounted. First look here, and I mean, that's aggressive looking. The rear actually I think is in great shape. Looks like the articulation back here, shock movement, everything is really good. With the fronts all the way in the absolute upper and rearmost position, I just don't think it's going to work with current setup. So as of right there, it has very limited, that's probably enough flex. It probably would perform really, really well. There's just basically, there's no shock movement. There's no shock movement. Basically up or down, we've limited the shock movement. And I noticed what was really interesting to me is what's actually the limiting factor is my inside upper links are hitting the motor. That's actually what's limiting this whole situation from going down further right here. Up is just we're at the top of the shocks. The shocks are just absolutely at the top of their travel. But we can't go down because those links are actually hitting the motor can right there. Boo! That's not what I was expecting. So I'm going to move this back a little bit, get a little bit of height up here, and that'll help a little bit with the suspension actually being able to, I don't know, suspend. I'll be danged, look at this. I have suspension. Hey, looky there. That's probably a good thing, and I have a little bit of articulation in the front. Also probably a good thing. I don't need too much, but a little bit up there, probably a good thing. So again, something that you can fine tune a little bit to your exact setup and needs. Now it's time for the last few things. Rear bumper needs to move over front bumper, and I do have my ESC mounted on this plate. I guess I could choose to put it instead back here. What I chose to do is, again, ignore this front mount location where I had the receiver and ESC combo before, and I've mounted it instead over here on the side. Turns out there's enough room there for it. It'll also help balance out the little battery that I run over here on the other side. Nice and easy. I think if I was doing this again, what I would recommend is probably not putting in this little plate back here. That's supposed to be there, I think, probably for the ESC. If you're not using it, I'd say get rid of it. Just like that, we have a working crawler back again. Check it out. It does the thing. Look at it. I've dealt with a few different carbon fiber swap over chassis in my RC time, and I'll be honest, this was the easiest one that I have done. So very easily just bolted directly in. So kudos to Injora for that piece of it specifically. But now we need to know, how did it impact it? Did we change the overall weight? What else happened? At moment of truth, we were at 613 grams. Wait a second. Now I'm at 615. How does that work? I went from a steel frame rail, or aluminum, or whatever the heck this is, aluminum probably. I went from that to carbon fiber, and it got heavier. And probably, maybe it's because I moved my ESC rearward. I screwed up my balance. I went from 385 to 374, and I went from 228 to 240. I actually took weight off the front, put it on the rear, and the whole dang thing got heavier. Well, I'll be danged. What makes this even more disappointing is I didn't even put in the little electronics tray that they have. I didn't even put it in. still sitting over there. I never did figure out what the little rubber bandy things are for. There's 4 of them. I wonder if it's supposed to be shock things. You know, sometimes people like to rubber band their shocks in order to suck them down. Maybe that's what that's for. Yeah, some Velcro. It's going to be helpful in the future for mounting some things. But the dang truck weighs more and the weight's in the wrong spot. Let's check a couple of our other measurements. So rear height to the rear bumper. Yeah, right about the same. I might have come down a millimeter or 2, maybe. The front, we know, actually is down about a millimeter or 2, and it was even lower there for a little while. So if you want to get rid of any shock articulation you have, you can get it down into the mid-50s. But that is where that is. Speaking of articulation, is it about 50-ish? 50, coming up to about... Yeah, about 55, so just slightly shy of where it was before we did all this. And the front is at about 50 as well. I guess we're going to have to get it to the indoor crawler course and see how it does. Maybe it just really blows us away on the crawler course and makes a big difference, but none of the maths are mathing at the moment. Back from the micro crawler course, checking out this with the new chassis on it, and the truck still overall does quite well, but I can't tell versus when I drove it there before any difference, which makes sense because all we did was add 2 grams and put some weight in the wrong spot. So that is a little bit disappointing. I was hoping that this chassis would really unlock some cool new performance, a little bit better everything for this truck, and it's just not doing it. But it's still fun. It looks good on there. I'm not going to take it off, but I am definitely going to consider what I can do next in order to move some of that weight back to the front, take some weight off, and still continue to make this truck just a little bit better. So if this is interesting to you, I have a whole Redcat Ascent 18 playlist. It'll be popping up over here to your right. You can check it out there, anything else that I've done with the truck. And if you are interested for some reason in this chassis, there'll be a link down in the video description to where you can buy it. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.